this RESI panel discussion. My name is Alessandra Di Bacco, and I'm a partner at Takeda Venture based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I'll be the moderator of the discussion today. I'm joined here on this panel by 4 accomplished and experienced investors, and together we will address some of the key aspects of venture investing, as well as discussing practical advices for entrepreneurs. I think it is, we definitely need to acknowledge that we've been living a really unprecedented time with this pandemic and COVID-19. And this has been affecting our business, our personal life, and of course the venture capital is not immune to it. The outbreak has effectively curtailed in a record time, I must say, what has been a steadily growing market opportunity to venture-backed company and investor. So perhaps we can start reflecting about these current changes. And I will ask the panelists to briefly introduce themselves and reflect about what the funding landscape looks like today and what is their expectation in the near future, perhaps 24 or 36 months. Maybe if I can, I will start with Claire, and then we can go from Dave, Saki, and Tom. Claire?
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Alessandra. Nice to meet the panel. So I'm Claire Laurent. I'm principal with JJDC, which is the venture arm of Johnson & Johnson families of companies within Johnson Innovation. And so I don't know if you wanted the background quickly. I'm a biologist. I've been working in R&D for 15 years at Pfizer, then spent two years and a half at Samsung Ventures, making investment in healthcare technology, and life sciences. And to your point, Alessandra, we've definitely seen changes in the pace, not of the activity level, because the activity is really high. I think all of us are super busy. Everybody is actually, even though of course we're working from home. For investment, that's fine, but for scientists and R&D teams, it's different to not have access to the lab. And so what I anticipate, and I think nobody can argue with that, is probably some delay in the work plan. And some of the companies will be able to cope with that. Others will have to, will need some maybe bridging financing.
Hi, my name is Saki Asanuma, and thank you for having me for this panel. Great opportunity for me. I'm the founding president of Taiho Ventures. We are a corporate venture fund for Taiho Pharmaceutical, Japanese oncology company. Even before then, I was at the Astellas Venture Management for 5 years as president CEO. So I have almost 10 years for the experience for the corporate venture fund. And even before then, I was at the financial VC, Japan-based. I'm working from the California office. So I have been in the Bay Area over 20 years now, and I made more than 50 investments so far, and half of them went public through the IPO M&As. And in addition to the pure equity play, I have the early stage BD experience for the ability to buy academia research collaboration, spin out using Taiho asset molecule, and also option investment as well. So nice to meet you, everybody here. Thanks.
Excellent. What is your expectation for the investment going forward? As Claire mentioned, there have been some delay in the ability of the company of executing and their R&D plans. How do you see the speed of the investment, or how do you see the field changing, or changing in which direction for the next 24 months or 36?
Sure. Okay. So Taiho Venture is working for the very early stage oncology company, first in class. And then, so most of the significant impact comes from pandemic situation is late stage clinical companies.
Okay.
And early stage, my portfolio is relatively less impacted. Okay. And that's a good thing for us. Yeah. And, you know, oncology field is very, many things are going on, and very VC funding and financing, IPO, it's very, it's keeping busy. And so we are very enjoying under this environment as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Maybe Tom, do you want to add on?
Sure. Hi, thanks for inviting me on the panel for a start. I'm Tom Gibbs. I work at Debiopharm Innovation Fund, which is the strategic fund of Debiopharm, which is a pharmaceutical developer, family owned, out of Switzerland, focused on oncology and infectious disease. So we're using the fund to invest in digital health because we're interested to know things outside pure therapeutics. And to say digital health includes digital therapeutics, which interest us too. So that's the focus of the fund, tools to help us understand the future of drug development and help us understand the future of patient treatment pathways. So I've been investing, well, I've been in the investment fund, I'm sorry, for about 8 years. And before that, my career has been split half and half between life science technology developers and the pharma industry, including three stints in startups. So I've seen both sides of the coin, you could say. And as far as what we see or we've been seeing with COVID-19, I think we weren't alone in putting everything on pause for a moment, a couple months, while we looked to see what our companies needed. Companies that have just raised money, they're okay. Companies that hadn't quite finished their raise have found themselves in a bit of a sticky situation. And what we're seeing now, this is my impression and how we view ourselves, is that things are picking back up again. So people have done their kind of census of what the companies are needing in terms of money, and once that's established and there's plans in place, then we can go back to investing again. So that's more or less where we're at.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And Dave, I see now you're back online. Would you like to introduce yourself and see from your side, how do you see the future, or at least the near-term future for investing and new company?
Thank you, Alessandra. I hope you can hear me now.
We can.
So, quick introduction. Dave Schulte, Managing Director of McKesson Ventures. I spent more than a decade in corporate venture at Kaiser Permanente, so came from the payer and provider world, and helped build the venture program there, and I'm now doing something similar at McKesson. And different from the other panelists, we're primarily focused on software and services rather than traditional drug discovery or life sciences. And I think in terms of what's changed, I do sense in the world of software and services, there has been a slowdown in deal activity. I think it's sector dependent. So particularly companies that are selling solutions to providers and hospitals, you've seen a significant slowdown with a few exceptions. Anything that seems to offer a telehealth component appears to have a tailwind behind it. Where we focus in pharma services and pharma software, I have seen less of a slowdown. I think there's plenty of interest in that category, particularly in data and analytics. And so, we've had a portfolio company raise money in 3 weeks. So I don't think there are easy generalizations about how the landscape is changing, but I think there is a recognition among our peers in the software and services segment of venture that pharma is a much more stable customer, biotech is a much more stable customer, and so there's a lot of interest in businesses and solutions that are serving that customer segment. And so, your question about the future, I actually think that will remain a relatively healthy area for entrepreneurs to build businesses and to raise money in the short run.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for their perspective, your background. And so open, and as I hear, there is, perhaps some slowdown, but a lot of good opportunity for the future. And of course, like in any downturn, there are always, open window for a smart entrepreneur to start a new business and take advantage of the environment. So perhaps we can reflect and discuss a little bit what an entrepreneur should think about when he's preparing himself to go fundraising. And it is said that, catch a fish is like think like one. how can an early scientist should think, how can they think like an investor? What should they understand of the organization that they are interacting with? What are basically the good things and the not so good things that an entrepreneur should think about when approaching an investor like you guys, and engage for a potential investment? Who wants to start? David, you want to go since you are just finished?
Sure,
Just
happy to.
give us some advices of the audience that will listen to us.
Sure, I think, so a couple things come to mind quickly. We, again, this is in the framework of software and services. We've seen lots of entrepreneurs in recent pitches include the COVID-19 opportunity and how they're going to capitalize on COVID. And my advice is that's generally not a sustainable trend for them to build a business on or to raise money on. I think absolutely entrepreneurs should understand how they will succeed in a post-COVID world, but generally some of these pivots appear a lot more opportunistic to me, and it's not core to the long-term success of their businesses. And so I wouldn't make that mistake. I think some of the things that entrepreneurs are doing well, and we tend to invest in commercial stage businesses that have revenues. I think some of them are trading near-term growth for cash preservation to weather the storm and manage through an uncertain time. I think others are focusing the product roadmap and the development roadmap on core initiatives. And I think in some ways times like this make really good entrepreneurs more scrappy, more resilient, more focused. And so I think the message is lots of good companies will be built during uncertain times. And we continue to believe there's lots of good ideas that are being developed and businesses that should continue to be funded during this period of time. So I don't think entrepreneurs should be any less bold or become risk averse in the current environment, but I do think it does focus on more core opportunities and near-term opportunities.
Perfect. Anybody feels to add on, agree, disagree, or has a different take?
Sure, I would agree with Dave. I think we saw a wave of AI opportunities from a few years back until now, more or less. I remember being on one panel and somebody said, "What are you looking for in AI?" I'm not looking for AI. I'm looking for solutions to medical problems. If they use AI, that's fine. If they use a screwdriver, that's fine. So COVID now seems to be the current goût du jour, the current flavor. And I agree absolutely with Dave. What we're looking for as an investor is we're looking for building value in the medium term. It's not a flash in the pan, and it's not a 400-year journey either. So I think one thing that entrepreneurs should understand, and I know we're corporate venture people, but I think we also have an interest in building value to a certain point and having perhaps an exit so we can keep our funds sustained. So I think that's one thing that a lot of early stage entrepreneurs don't get, is that we need an exit. We need to build value, and then we need to realize that value. And we're investing earlier stage than Dave, so we're doing typically late pilots, very early commercialization. So there's not the same revenue stream that other later stage investments have. But even so, you need to have a vision of where you're going and how that's going to build value. And certainly in our case, if an entrepreneur wants to talk to us, they need to be thinking about what medical value they're bringing. So we don't do consumer type digital health. Sorry, Dave, you missed my introduction, but we're also doing digital health investments. No therapeutics unless they're digital therapeutics. Anyway, so just to say, they need to build value. They need to think that we're investors too, and at some point we want some money back, or at least some realization of value. And after that, it's be attentive to the communication, because you asked for do's and don'ts. So I would say a don't is, don't send me a 90-slide teaser. That's not a teaser. That's a Bible. I don't want a Bible. Okay. So for me anyway, it's a 7 to 15, maybe 20 slides at the most. So try and be sensitive to the person you're communicating with. And we don't, like any investors, we don't have huge amounts of time to look at each potential opportunity in the first instance. So you need to treat that with respect and try and pitch the communication at the right level.
To your point, it has to be very clear upfront what is the problem that we've been trying to solve. Because I think that will make even faster the triage to see if this fits within you know, the area that we are interested in or not. So it helps a lot, and having a speedy, let's say, feedback to the company, and if it works, then we'll go from there. Saki, Claire?
Yeah, I totally agree with Tom. So we are reviewing the thousands of these every year, so we have not enough time to look at each individually at the beginning. So the key point is, I think, the very trustful person into the action is a more important if we look closer to the deals. That's one thing. And also on the science publicizing the cell or nature, that is another intriguing starting point. So that kind of two stuff is initial screening point for myself.
Excellent. Claire, would you like to add?
Yeah, I can add that if we are the fish they want to catch, we want them to understand that not only we are investor and we definitely want exits, but we want to nurture a relationship between our company and their company, even though there is a difference maybe in stage of development, but that's really the goal. And so the expectation would be that they do their homework before we communicate or before they put together the slide deck, so we can see how the two entities can, you know, synergize or enable each other. And that's also a transition to your third topic, I believe, Alessandra.
Excellent. So then if somebody wanted to reach out to you, what is the best way? Is just cold email through common people that you know, network, or through attending meetings? How important is, for example, attending meetings for entrepreneurs, at meeting like RESI, and being exposed and interact and get to know a different investor and their philosophy and kind of approach, and this to the goal of approaching the right investor for their business. What would it be, like if somebody wants to interact with you, Claire, what would be the best way?
There are several ways. There is the introduction using a common person or friends or person of the field. There is the email with a very precise point and a quick to the point pitch deck. And there's the in-person that we are in a common, I don't know, conference, or and the person show up and say, just hi, I want to introduce myself, I'll reach out later with an email and I'd like to talk about my project. I love the in-person just because a lot of this job is about working as a team. And that always is important. Management in the company is really important, so I like that as well. But be efficient and to the point is, I think, very important.
Excellent. Everybody wants to add anything else? So what's your best way to interact with potential company, entrepreneur? What you find over the year being the most successful way? Maybe Tom, you can start.
Yeah, just thinking about that. I agree with Claire. The personal touch is what makes a difference, but be succinct again. Probably the thing that has the most traction, at least with us, is being introduced through a network, because then the company comes recommended, and then it sounds bad, but we're morally obliged to look more deeply into the company somehow. It's, I mean, we look at every case that comes our way. Don't get me wrong. But somehow if it comes from a co-investor from a previous investment or whatever, then there's a kind of stamp of approval that makes us look a little closer. And other than that, I think cold email is very poor. We all get lots of cold email in our email boxes, and it's very hard to give enough time to those things and look properly. So I would go with a personal touch. Meeting in conference is great in an informal way. It's a good way to see a lot of startups and meet a lot of investors from the startup perspective. But that has to be the first touch, and then there has to be follow-up.
Reiterate what's been said, which is an introduction from a prior investor or co-investor, a known source, certainly lends credibility to the quality of what the entrepreneur is doing. I would just raise a question that I don't know the answer to this, but I think we are beginning to think about, our team, whether or not an in-person pitch is required. You know, I think historically we always felt we would never make an investment, we would never initiate full due diligence until we had a pitch with our entire team in person with the entrepreneur and the management team. And I think the last few months we've learned to operate without that experience. And you know, we may be more flexible going forward. I don't know. I think we're debating that and discussing that. You know, is a virtual pitch sufficient to make an informed decision about how much time we want to invest on something? And so that may be an evolution in how we operate. And I don't know how other firms are thinking about it, but it may make it easier for entrepreneurs that they don't have to fly all over the country and have in-person meetings with every potential investor who's later stage in their diligence. We'll see.
Excellent. Yeah, definitely. With the new normal, a lot of alternative approach have been in some way forced to us. And I'm sure that there will be a lot of changes in the way we run our business going forward, because there is nothing more than a necessity to identify new paths forward. And there are always some silver lining in this situation. So I totally agree with that. So we had provided some idea about what's the best way to approach the investors, what are the do's and don'ts. Maybe we can discuss a little bit about the process. Every group, every company has a different process to identify if it's, the investment has the right fit. The things they are going to be looked at in order to build a conviction ourselves that this is a company who has a future potential and that we want to help it to grow. So maybe I will ask each of you if you can describe at a high level a little bit what's the process for investment to find the right fit, and also what type of due diligence you would do, and how important is the technology that the company brings, the problem they're trying to solve, and the team itself, the personality on the team, how this weighs on your decision to move it forward or not. Who would like to start? Sakai, this time you will be the first one.
Sure. Okay. So as I mentioned, we are very much focusing on the first-in-class early stage oncology investments. So with that, the science should be the cutting-edge new science, new mode of action, new pathways, and that's one thing. And then hopefully the target is validated by CRISPR or other other sources, and that is one thing. And if they have the hit molecule or two molecules, that is a very good starting package for us to look at the company. And then looking at the people and the investor as well, but Series A financing, no investor at the point. So maybe only looking at the entrepreneur side and how they are successful in the past and are working together in the past. That is the most impactful situation for us. And then if those are passing, so people and science and the financing, three packages all together, that is a clear vision for us. And then we will take maybe it's depending on the syndication play or taking a lead position. And so if go to the syndication play, we just do the diligence and take the investment committee, just one stop approval process. That's very easy for us. But if we take the lead or co-lead, we need to identify the syndication partner. That takes longer, and we will wait for the term sheet negotiation with them, and also prepare for the potential term sheet. So such kind of work is all together in parallel. So that's our process.
Thank you. Anybody else wants to add and describe the process? Claire?
Yeah, happy to. It's not very different. I will highlight the differences. The differences is we invest at various stages, not only early. It could be as early as seed, but it can go all the way to later series, C, and even in public companies. So that's one difference. Another difference is we're not only focused on oncology. Janssen has and Johnson & Johnson have much more diversified activity, and so we have 3 sectors: pharma, consumer, and medical devices. And within each sector, we have areas that are very precisely identified as of strategic interest for the purpose of investing. And we are a corporate venture, but we didn't define earlier if we were more financial or strategic. We are both, but the decision to invest is driven by the strategic alignment internally. So my job is going to be to evaluate how solid is the science in a quick manner and how it could fit. And then quickly I will have to find the right champion in the organization who is going to, depending on how it fits in the area strategy, is going to go deeper in due diligence, confidential due diligence, and that will allow to understand better not only the science, but of course the corporate and financial status of the company. And robustness of the company. And then we also have an investment committee internally. And in parallel of that, we have to make sure that the champion we identified in the company is willing for this investment to go forward. And we are going to try to define a roadmap for future interactions with between this portfolio company and the champions group, so that we can understand areas of mutual interest. Sometimes it's capabilities, sometimes it's commercial, sometimes it can be discovery, areas that will enable good companies. And that's the process.
Excellent. Yeah, this is very similar to what we have as well, since we focus as a strategic investor at Takeda. We look at the opportunity that will fit some of the therapeutic area that we have. So I would say that for entrepreneur and company, it will be very important to understand which area the company that you are targeting are focused on. Because, for example, if they are coming to Takeda for cardiovascular, that is not an area anymore where we are going to be focused on, and then we'll lose some time in preparing material and interacting with us where, will not be a fit, because similar to your case, we will need some internal champion to present and describe how the company will, potential investment will align with the internal work and the company. So that's definitely an important that the entrepreneur and the company looking for funding understand the area of focus of the venture groups, as well as within the area of focus, what are the diseases of interest? Because as we discussed before, trying to articulate beforehand what is the problem that they decided to go and answer. That is a very important point that needs to be clarified during the first interaction. But I'm interested about what Tom and Dave has to say regarding their process, since they might be looking at investing in companies which are a little bit different from what will be general looking in terms of therapeutics. So maybe I can ask the two of you to kind of describing what is the process, what the process looks like in your case.
Shall I go first? So we're looking, as I mentioned, at digital health things and data-driven tools for drug development. And as far as process it's not too different, right? Most people that receive a new opportunity can quickly see if it fits or doesn't fit. Does it touch oncology or infectious disease? Is it digital? Is it a data-driven tool? That's not too hard. So we really have a 3-stage evaluation. The first is really more about the fit. You know, are they raising money? Is it the right kind of amount of money where we could fit in, which is typically Series A or B. And then if we tick all those boxes, then we go into what we call a DD2, so a kind of second stage, where we're really digging into the technology and the team. This is kind of business and technical due diligence. Towards the end of that period, we'll put together a term sheet. If we can come to some reasonable agreement on terms, assuming the due diligence is favorable, of course, then we'll roll over and do the final stage, which is legal and financial due diligence. So this is more or less a red flag type of approach, seeing if there's anything, you know, is the company in a big lawsuit we didn't know about, for example, or things that will be an unpleasant surprise once you've invested.
Yep.
And during that period, we'll be papering the investment, so doing investment agreements, shareholder agreements, or whatever the necessary documents are. So that's the basic process. But Saka and Claire spoke about the strategic fit. So for us, we don't have an obligation to have a business case internally, so we don't have to find a business champion before doing the investment. But we clearly invest in companies where we think we might be able to use their technology in the future. So we have the nimbleness of not having to have a business case, but nonetheless, it's in the back of our mind. And when we start thinking about who we put on the board or as an observer, who gets involved with the portfolio company, they were very clearly thinking about what groups within the company could they work with to bring about some kind of collaboration in the future, to increase our learning from the interactions.
Hey, Dave?
Yeah, there's a lot of similar themes here, I think, among all of us. And the essence of the question tends to be strategic relevance, and for various firms, what that means. And for us, we are not investing to fill an M&A pipeline. We're not investing to fill a product gap. We are more further down the continuum in terms of investing for what we call insight returns. And so that means learning about markets, the rate at which markets are developing, new business model innovation. And so these tend to be in markets that are adjacent to McKesson's core business. And there is a possibility that McKesson would eventually enter one of those businesses. And it's a long way of saying that's the equivalent of what Tom called, the first phase of diligence, which is, does this business, is their end customer first and foremost an end customer that we care about? And that tends to be pharma, life sciences, pharmacies, or payers, less so providers. And then is the solution or the market one that fits into our scope of interest? And if we get a very quick yes to that, then we enter what I would call more traditional, venture capital, financial investment return diligence. And I think, where we place a lot of our emphasis because of the stage of businesses that we're focused on, we spend a lot of time doing reference calls and customer calls. That tends to be the focus of where we spend a lot of our time. And then just in terms of nuts and bolts of the process, we tend to make decisions in 30 to 45 days if we are co-investing with somebody else. If we're leading the financing, then it's likely longer than that. So that's a quick summary.
Excellent. So for us as a Takeda Venture, is very important to have an active role in working with the company. So we tend to help them in their in their goals. And once they are part of our portfolio, we can provide support in terms of scientific knowledge as well as internal expertise, or introduce into networks that can help, closing other rounds or having additional other investor. So I just wonder, I have a sense from where the description that all of you tended to have an active role once they invest in the company. Is that a fair assumption, or there is a more kind of more investment, but not that involved? I'm just wondering if any of you has a different opinion. Do you guys, all of you, have an involved?
Yeah. The short answer, we require a board observer seat at a minimum, and if our investment size or ownership warrants it, we'll take a board seat. And I think it's consistent with the reason that we're making these investments, which is, we are trying to be what we would call a sensor on market trends, emerging developments. And it's difficult to gain those insights if we're a more passive investor. And so we require the minimum that we take a board observer seat.
Anybody wants to add to what Dave described?
On our side, it's similar to what Dave described. We always take a board seat. Usually we're investing to have 15 to 20% of the capital of the company. So that's pretty much always justified. Often an observer as well, because that maximizes our learning potential. So again, we're like Dave, we're trying to learn from these investments we do, sensing. Very, very well put, I thought. Then we get involved in committees, we'll spar, we keep in close contact with the CEOs or chairman or whoever is appropriate. We try and, when we do an investment, we try and see a two-way street of value. We like to bring value to the company we're investing in over and above the money, with our decades of experience developing pharmaceuticals being a kind of potential customer for many of our portfolio companies. And then there's what we learn from the company. And if we don't see that going both ways, then we typically don't invest. If we can't learn from them or we can't bring more than just money, then typically we don't do an investment.
And do your company tend to follow the company over the time, has a move, for example, from Series A, Series B, and beyond, kind of really developing as a close partnership with the company and enabling them along all the path, if you wanted to an exit. So I would just wonder if any of you can comment about some of their strategy, if that's what is normally done, or it depends of the company. Anybody want to add?
We're generally mid to long term, so yes, we follow through several series typically.
We are very long term as well, so we will support the company until the exit timing, that is M&A or IPO. So even IPO situation, we will put our money to the IPO stock as well. So once invested, we are very much working with the company and alongside, and then supportive all the following investment round. And then, as you mentioned earlier, so as I take a board role doing the pipeline prioritization, hiring key people, and financing support, and BD support between the portfolio and the parent company. In our case, Taiho Pharmaceutical, that is another support on behalf of a portfolio company.
It's really similar. Thank you, and comparable to what we're doing. We are also long-term investors, and we do everything we can for the success of the company, and try to facilitate communication with Johnson & Johnson, of course.
Excellent. Yeah. So maybe we can switch a little bit the gear and talk about how is
Takeda Ventures?
how is it there? Yes, we invested primarily in equity. So when we do our investment, we don't have any string attached in the sense that the company is not required to do a partnership or work with us in the long run. Of course, being a strategic investor, our goal, our measure of success is the development of a partnership eventually between Takeda and our portfolio company. So we'll foster interaction with the internal experts, but but we don't participate in this kind of meeting. So they will basically interact with our portfolio company, and we'll decide if it's a value for both of them to develop a further relationship that will do. But once they become portfolio company, we'll manage them only exclusively from financial point of view. Well, as I mentioned before, we'll provide scientific support and knowledge, and we'll basically follow them all the term to IPO or other successful exit. So similar to that. Maybe I would like to touch upon an important point that I think the company should think about when presented to an investor, is to clearly identify what are the inflection point that they plan to reach with their investment. Because it's very important that investor, at least when we talk to investor, that we have a sense of how much is the value of the company being created, and at which point then perhaps you are, for example, ready to go for a Series B. Has to be the Series A, the plan for the Series A has to come to a point that you are generating additional value for the company. And sometimes that is not so clear in mind of some of the company that we interact with, because they might try to bring the entire pipeline forward rather than having maybe one or two key assets, bring it to an important inflection point and still have some understanding of how to move forward the pipeline. So I just wonder if you can comment about that. What is the typical, I mean, I don't think you can say typical, but what is the general inflection point you are looking for? It's an IND, is early clinical data. What do you think the company should try to accomplish, like with the funds they are looking for, such that that they are structured well in a path for success in the future? Maybe Saiki, do you want to comment on that?
Oh, again? Okay. So usually, we will take the Series A financing. We will set up the 2 to 3 tranche financing. And maybe the first one should be maybe in vivo efficacy, and then development candidate selection is the next one. And then IND filing, the human POC data points. That is a kind of streamline for the usual typical milestone we set for the tranche milestones. But even much earlier seed funding case, maybe we need to see some cell data, not only for the enzyme assay. So such kind of data is, if we look at the seed stage investment much earlier milestone, we have to look at it. So that's typical our criteria for the milestones. Okay.
Clear? Are your milestone and your inflection point you are looking for the use of pre-seed similar, or you have differences?
Yeah, no, it's similar. It goes further. I want to highlight that it may differ between a life science company and, of course, technology, a software. I'm thinking of Dave, or digital therapeutics or diagnostics. In general, when there's more data that proves that technology or product is going to work or has a higher probability of working, that's the inflection point you're referring to, and that's usually where the company has to. We recommend that they raise money when they have this data available, and so usually it corresponds to a new valuation, right? So that's the way it's designed when everything works well. And for life science, pharma investment, I think we like the IND and even more the early clinical stage, when you have like proof of mechanism or proof of pharmacology. in patients because you have the understanding of the safety and you show that you hit the target or you're able to affect the pathology in a meaningful way, recognizing the early stage and small data sample. However, there are earlier stages that are of interest, and I think, as we all know, venture capital investment is about taking more risks. So we also recognize that coming in earlier is a better enabler, and is definitely the key to what we're doing. So discovery candidate is also a stage that we definitely consider and enabling in our investments. We're really pretty much agnostic as long as it makes sense from a indication, technology, check size, and yeah, all data points are important. And actually, it's better to tie the financing events to these new rates.
Excellent. And how is it for the technology? How is it the inflection point for Tom and Dave?
Yeah, sorry. I think Claire's already covered that. You know, it's about data, but it could also be a business model prove out.
Okay.
What we've seen quite a number of companies is going, for example, from providers as customers to having providers and pharma as customers. Yes, as customers. So how do you prove that out? By getting some nice contracts with pharma, and that would be a very inflection point proving the new business model works. Another wrinkle on the same kind of idea is going from a service type software to a SaaS or license-based business. Service has difficulties with scalability. I think we all know that. So the obvious transition is you prove out your technology on the service business where people will pay you to develop, and then you try and transition that over to an off-the-shelf or SaaS type model. So there again, proof of a business model can also be what you're looking for a value inflection point. But most commonly it's data. So, you know, showing your algorithm works on a set amount of data, or having a certain number of customers validating that it works.
Excellent.
And my answer would be very similar to Tom's. We have reasonably hard rules about when we'll invest. You know, we want to see a business achieve 5 million in revenues or more, and you'll see lots of clever ways that entrepreneurs try and use ARR or bookings or forward-looking forecasts, all kinds of ways to inflate how far along they are commercially, but that tends to be a threshold question. And then it's how many customers do you have? And then in terms of inflection points, it's customer retention, customer renewals. Tom said it well, shifting what often tend to be services businesses in the early days to more software and more products over time. And then I could just go back to the previous question, because one thing that I think we're doing that some strategic investors are not doing is we are surveying our portfolio companies with an NPS survey. And so each year we get an NPS score based on how well we are contributing to the success of our portfolio companies. And I think this is a fundamental question for lots of strategic investors. I'd love to tell you that we've cracked the code. I think it's something we all struggle with and would like to figure out an easy way to solve. But as an industry, strategic investors tend to, sometimes miss expectations on this front, which is how much value do we bring to our portfolio companies? And I'm sure we all have some really sterling examples in our portfolio, and then some disappointments. And so we're trying to measure that in the form of an NPS survey. And we've created a separate team. It's part of our group, but I've worked under both models where the investment professional tries to help with the business development and facilitating introductions internally and externally. We've decided to try and separate those activities and create a separate incentive structure for our portfolio development team. And again, I'd love to tell you that it's perfect, but it's not. But I think those are some things that we're experimenting with as our industry continues to try and meet the expectations on the strategic value dimension for our portfolio companies.
Excellent, thank you. Maybe in the remaining minutes, I would like to touch base on company creation. So we'd like to discuss if your groups are, involved in company creation, what's the process for that, and what would be the advice that we will give to, scientists, tech-savvy academics that have, deep knowledge of new technology, how to approach and so I'm just curious if that's something that you are currently involved or if your group is considering. Want to start? Claire, maybe?
Yes, we definitely, Alessandra. We are at the time where JJDC wants to create some company as well as continue to invest in companies that are pre-existing. And so the way we do that is really we review internal technology that we could accelerate by more focus and more dynamic or flexible development. We also consider technology from academics or from other pharma that is available for spin out or spin off or buy. And then it's a combination of refining what we believe the technology can give in terms of solution. So back to problem solving, what it is actually that will be useful for the community. Does it make business sense? How much does it cost to develop? How do we want to finance it as a venture capital group, but also enable as a company, broader company?
Excellent. Anybody else who wants to chime in? Should I call somebody?
I can chime in only to say we don't do company creation.
Okay.
And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is a question of deployment of capital. If we were to do seed, pre-seed, small companies, we need to have a lot of companies in our portfolio, and that's not what we're shooting for. We're shooting for 10 to 15. And the other thing is also bandwidth, because we'd also want to spend an awful lot of time with them, because first-time entrepreneurs or very early stage companies need typically a lot of help.
Yes.
And in the digital space, we think it's really easy to make sexy-looking PowerPoints, but for our investment, we're more interested in seeing some proof that actually does something useful and somebody's willing to pay. So typically we only invest when there's late stage pilots or early stage commercial activity. So all that rules out, unfortunately, rules out.
No, that's fine. That's sort of fine. Is the same for you, Dave?
It is. And I think for all the reasons Tom mentioned, and probably a third, which is a sense of humility that I don't know that we would contribute as much value to early stage businesses. Our greatest value is for businesses that have been further along.
Okay. Saki, do you do company creation?
Yeah, we do. And last year, actually, we have set up the two new codes. The first one is Breakpoint Therapeutics in Germany. That is asset comes from Evotech. And the people are coming from a couple of people from Evotech, and then they are continuously working with Evotech for the chemical support. So that is the case. Every company creation is case by case. That in that case, very small management team and working together, continuously working with Evotech for the drug discovery process. And then so we set up the term and structure and invited Medici Venture from UK. And set up the new code. That is one case. And the another one is a spin-out using Taiho molecule. This molecule is a EGFR exon 20 insertion inhibitor, and very popular these days. And then this asset was very popular, and we got 4 term sheets. And then we picked the best one. And then that was NPM's Kainan Oncology, and we worked with them to establish a new company under Kainan structure. So that is a very useful resource, taking advantage of others for the case. And in some case, a long time ago, when I was at the Astellas, I have set up the 2 buy company from the scratch, working with the other venture folks. So that is a totally different, lots of scientific founders, how much we have to provide the options for shares, for funding shares. every case is different and case by case, but we need to address it together with the other investors and funds.
Excellent. And for us, we actually have a group called Strategic Academic Alliances, which specifically interact with academia and identify, prominent new scientists of technology, and they work hand in hand with the Takeda Venture. So we then help the scientists if it's interested in funding a company. So we provide the capital and the knowledge. And going forward, we are considering the opportunity of having an incubator ourselves, where we can de-risk the novel science and technology, doing the killer experiment, really confirming that what was observed in the academia is actually tracking. And so we are kind of thinking around how to kind of evolve this model, but we are definitely interested in not only supporting existing company, but also creating company which they might then, being successful and being funded by other investors and be completely separate from us. But we will be still helping them be, growing. So looking at the clock, I think we are reaching the top of the hour, and I would like to thank the panelists for their insights, advices. I hope the discussion have provided to our audience useful information and tips to navigate it, these turbulent times, and to how to identify the best step to interact with ventures, and to come closer to a successful fundraise. With this, I will conclude. Thank you for your attention, and have a good rest of the day. Thank you.